I'm Apshi and welcome to Health Matters by Malaysia Healthcare. Today I have Dr. George Lee, Aiman Ox and Syed Harris here to speak to me all about men's health. So let's just dive into it. So I think that there's a lot of stigma and difficulty in having conversations about our health. And did you guys feel that growing up with your family and your friends that you were able to talk about your health freely?
Good one. I think it's always difficult, especially you're not sure what you're going through. You don't know where to start, especially you're not being educated from your family or your peers or your school about these matters, whatever that may be, right?
Yep.
So I think it's been it was not difficult at first because you're not aware, but I think as you grow up, you realize how difficult it was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
I think as a child, you're so open with your parents and your friends, and then suddenly when you're a teenager and all these ideas of masculinity gets kind of put onto you that you have to be a certain way, that to talk about the things that maybe you don't feel good about. It's not always easy.
It's not easy.
Yeah. What about you, Dr.
Well, I guess it's a long time ago since I grew up, right? So in distant memory in the Jurassic era. But in the viewpoint as a doctor, I think that's quite obvious because when you compare men and women, women will probably have more access to healthcare and discuss about health-related issues, and men tend not to do that for several reasons. Aiman said that probably not really knowing too much about the issues. Awareness is one. A second problem probably is men can be quite fearful of what they're facing.
Yeah.
Third thing perhaps is ego, because we're brought up in a society where we are expected to kind of take the lead, and then, boys don't cry, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then whenever you demonstrate some degree of willingness to find out about your own body, your own health, then that might be perceived as a bit of weakness.
Yep.
And then those are the combinations that actually make men more likely to hide and more likely to delay in diagnosis and also coming forward. And I guess one of the reasons why women always tend to outlive men is because men tend to present with diseases much later.
Oh, just generally, like biologically.
It is true, yeah.
Okay.
So there are many statistics in medical literature revealing that across the board, for all diseases, and then men only go and see doctors whenever the disease becomes more severe, and women tend to go and see doctors when the disease becomes intermediate.
Okay.
And perhaps one or two. It's like when it comes to genital urinary system, men tend to go and see doctors sooner. Right. I'm sure we will elaborate on that later.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
That's right. Genital urinary system.
So is that a biological thing or is that a social thing?
It's probably more nurture rather than nature. I think as men and women, genetically, we're not probably designed to hold back, because when you're ill, it's a evolutionary adaptation in order to find help. However, when the system actually, if you look around, when it comes to healthcare favors more children than women. Why do I say that? Let's say if a woman is not ill, when you first have your menses, you're not ill, but you see doctors. When you're pregnant, you're not ill, you see doctors. And when you give birth, you're not ill, you see doctors. And then when you have menopause, you see doctors. And you think about it, men only get to see doctors when you're ill. Right? Okay. And then that is one of the system era that actually kind of like favors access to women to healthcare, but not necessarily men. And interestingly, men will service their car, before the car expires, but they'll only service their body when it's, whenever it is broken.
Yeah.
So that's quite a good analogy that some of my patients tell me. And then I think that's something that we need to fix in order to at least see some sort of like parity or equity between men and women's health.
Yeah, and I think that starts a lot with conversations, isn't it? Just to open it up. But what about you, Harris? Did you always feel like you could speak about your health freely with your friends and your family?
Yeah, I think I did. I guess this may be a privilege, I guess. Well, I would say I'm blessed with, I think for me personally, just growing up, I was brought up in an environment which kind of allowed me to speak out in a sense where I didn't have any of those, nothing was holding me back from it. It was always encouraged to speak about it, things like that. I remember my dad would always, even if I always had that person to go to if I had something that I couldn't talk to anybody else about. So especially when it came to health, I knew that he was there for me to talk to. But I realized that there was a difference when I got a little bit, maybe around the teenage years, something changed or something happened where just personally I felt like, ooh, is that something I should go seek, help about, or should I go ask somebody about it? But I've never, nobody's told me I couldn't,
Yeah.
So I definitely, I can't say that I didn't have that environment to kind of talk about it, but there was definitely a change, I would say.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of pressure to just be okay.
I think so too.
Yeah. So with your own personal journey with health, when did you start to prioritize it, and was there something that got you hey, I need to focus on my health, or was it something that you just sort of naturally got into?
Well, interesting that you mentioned that. I mean, in life, there's always pull and push. And I think in a professional viewpoint, if you actually try to attract women to go and see doctors, it's always the push that is better. You don't do this, you're going to die, right? Okay. If you say this to men, they just say die lah, right? Okay, and then, which is quite not quite the way to do it. So I really think that healthcare approaches should be different, and then the way that men tends to go forward to seek treatment, it's either enticement, so that for example, when they realize that they're not so attractive, they put on weight and that sort of thing, and then they begin to start thinking that these are the advantage, I do it for myself. Okay, and then so those will be the thing that will perhaps be a facilitator for men to go forward. And the other thing is life events. So if you have, let's say, for example, someone close to you who dies and something like that would trigger something, and then that is something that perhaps will make men change their behavior a little bit and try to find out more about themselves, go for screening, go for checkups, and then go and find out more about their own health.
Yeah, it can be very shocking, and it makes you think about yourself when something happens to one of your friends or family members.
All the time, if you think that you're immortal, you're the fly cycle and also the cycle, the spin instructor, journey cycle, oxygen cycles, and all these instructors. And then, of course, you reach a point on your life that your body may have certain obstacles, and then that is something that your body will change as you age, right? And in order to face when is the part where you would assume that you are no longer immortal, and then when you really need to face up to the fact that you might have problems with health, especially mental health, and then it's something that is quite variable between different people, and that trigger will be very different for different individuals.
Yeah, and it's also a tough pill to swallow when you do get triggered by that. Hey, maybe I am not going to live forever, and maybe bad things can happen to me.
Well, speaks for yourself.
Yeah, maybe just me, lad. What about you guys?
No, I have a funny journey because as much as I was not educated much about health and being aware of what to look for, and when to self-diagnose to a certain degree, right? I've always lived an athletic life. I've always needed to know how to be stronger and bigger because I was raised in the States, right? So I'm always competing with larger men, right? So what doses, what kind of nutrients, But you do not know anything about your DNA. You don't know anything about your intolerance level, These are other aspects that I came from a generation where I guess the education was not as much. I know I look a little young, but the system was not really fully modernized or reached out in the market aspect of it until now. I think nowadays you get to see some acknowledgement of there. It's just either you want to make yourself aware about it or not, right? So I had a really interesting time of my life when I was 17, 18. I had 2 heart attacks. I died twice.
Oh
right?
my God.
So I was being told and diagnosed by doctors that I was going to die by 21 or 23. So I've done everything to keep myself alive, right? So I'm working things a bit more different.
Yeah.
Where I was forced to be aware because I didn't know what just shocked my system, right? But once you start deliberate and calibrate after many years of what actually happened, then I understood if I had screened myself, like Dr. George said, from earlier stages, I would have understand that the cause of me getting to a cardiac arrest is because I was taking things that I was intolerant to. I thought that was the dosage I need, and it was too much of a dosage. That was one of the byproduct of it, being allergic to something. So if every day you're allergic to peanuts, every day you eat peanuts, you're gonna get a stroke or a heart attack, right? So I think all these education and screenings is so necessary for us to be aware and conduct upon ourselves in the prior years. What is the rightful age? I wouldn't know. I'll probably have to consult, right? But these type of education needs to come out. Like Dr. George says, like women's easy. You know at what stages you need to consult, right?
Yeah.
For men, is it 7? Is it 12? Is it 18? Until
There's
now, I would not know what to
yeah.
say as well, right? And I'm living in a constant paranoia year by year, doing my own screening now, right? But even then, I felt like, is it enough, right? No one educated us is enough. We just have to puzzle it pieces by pieces, right? So it might be an environment thing that maybe we're too new in this education, or is it being adapted? I would not know. It's not my field of expertise to be aware, but all I can say, I'm doing my best, and I still feel like it's not enough.
So, I mean, if you were to find out more, obviously you don't know when is the right time, what to screen for, and that sort of thing. Where would you find the source of your knowledge?
Right now,
Yeah.
I'll definitely have to go see a physician. That's one thing I know. See a physician first, you know? And after that, see a DNA specialist. This is based on my experience,
From your
right?
experience,
But I know now I need to see a physician first. And then from there, they'll advise you, okay, specific parts, you need to see a specialist and so on and forth. But I think back then, I wouldn't even know what a physician is. I'd be too shy. Physician, you're gonna check my body? What for? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that stigma, right? But now I understand the aspects of what a physician does. It's definitely the touching stone, the base stone, right? But that's for me today. So is everyone aware about that? I'm not sure. I'm not too sure.
I mean, so just to add to that, I mean, for me, I feel like, I mean, I had a similar journey. Always been athletic. I love sports, and and just loving sports. I think you have idols. You have you look at Usain Bolt, super athletes, all these guys. And for me as a young boy, like I've always wanted to be like these guys. Like, how do I get there? How can I be these people? So I think for me personally, from a young age, I was one of those guys who was super curious about these things. So I would go online. And I would search like how do I get there? How do I look like Usain Bolt? How do I run as quick as Usain Bolt? Something like that. And then so I think from there it kind of like the curiosity grew, and I just started searching different areas of it. So the first thing you do is you'd see the workouts, right?
Yep.
And then once you got the workouts down, you see actually how to eat, the nutrition
Diet.
side of it.
Yeah.
So you delve into that, and then you see their recovery process. And then once you reach that stage, you learn about like the different doctors they go to for their recovery and all that, what they get checked, how they get checked yearly. So, and then also you find out how much they actually spend to become
That's
people
true.
of their caliber. And, a normal person couldn't actually do that.
Yeah.
But personally for me, that kind of started it out. Because I started out early, I would say like maybe 12, 13, even younger. I was
so
playing
young.
sports even in primary school. But especially in this day of age where there's so much information online, like I found that I could get at least to a certain point of knowledge through online, but always I've always remembered reading things where they always said like, this is just whatever they believe and what they see. For anything serious, always consult the specialist. Always consult. So I've always delved into doing like my own research and looking into it, but I knew my limits. I knew that there's a reason why doctors are experts and why we should go see these guys when we need to.
It's encouraging to hear that both of them were kind of like motivated and aspire to a fit life, a healthy looking life, and then that sort of things. But would you not both agree that this is exceptional rather than norm in the normal circumstances? So this is the whole idea that we're having this dialogue, is that we all aspire to be you, but the reality is that many people actually start off their life with non-communicable diseases.
That's right.
And I think that this is hopefully something that we can open up dialogues, that people will realize that, okay, you may start your life well, like, somebody in Harris and Aiman's situation, where all their lives they work towards a certain goal.
Inclined towards
That's right.
that,
But I think for the vast majority of men, is actually working backwards.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
I like to
Definitely.
tell you that before I met them both, I was a 108 kilogram person, and then I worked the other way around all my life. I guess the only thing I knew was which tuition class I have to go to in order to achieve certain grades, and then the only thing I need to do is that a sporting activity is a luxury I can't afford. Make sure I get the grades, make sure I get to Cambridge, make sure I get to Oxford, make sure I get wherever I'm supposed to be, and then later on realize that all that has a price to pay. And then now I'm paying the price, but I'm living a better life, thanks to these guys. They make sure that I'm the oldest I'm the oldest uncle, in their cycling classes, in the swim classes. But I guess
Also
I'm
most
not
energetic.
most energetic.
Enthusiastic.
It's
all about attitude.
It's all about attitude. It's all about thick skin and shameless, right? Okay, you kind of say, okay, forget it. I don't really care. The guy next to me is 1/3 of my age, but Uncle George is not to be bullied. That's right. Okay. So I think what I'm trying to imply is that it's never too late.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. If Dr. George can do it, reduce from 108 kilo to 78 kilo in about 3 years. Okay, there
That's a
was
big
something
drop,
that happened. Okay, I had an accident and that sort of thing. Just like Aiman, something that actually
Triggered.
The inciting sort of incident.
But the reality is that the vast majority of men really need to kind of like buckle up and realize that if they don't look after their own health, nobody else can do that for them, and they're just facing a very, very tough journey ahead of non-communicable diseases.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. One aspect is the physical part, which is the most obvious part that we focus a lot day to day, right? But a lot of men, or maybe even women, don't realize the aspect of the organs or your physical state. Once it starts to deteriorate, your mind deteriorates too. Your mind is an organ, right? So your train of thought, your decision making, it gets delirious. The processing gets slower. The lack of focus. We don't realize there's not much of awareness to tell people, hey, when your mind is not working, doesn't mean that you're just exhausted, but maybe your physical is exhausted. It's not getting the nutrients you need, and so on and forth, right? And I think this is the aspect that we also need to teach ourselves, where if your physical is not functioning to its best, what makes you think your mind's going to be at its best state
they speak so much
of
about
sanity, right?
how much your mental health, a lot of it lives in your gut. So I'll always tell my friend, am I anxious because I have a stomach ache, or do I have a stomach ache because I'm anxious? Which is it? But it's kind of just they go hand in hand. But before we get into mental health, I wanted to ask you about early intervention. Why is it so important? And in what ways do you think the health of men across the board, or the health of people, can be improved through early intervention? And how do we educate people to do so?
I think save costs. The earlier that you have it, the easier for you to plan out your life. When you find out too late, when you don't have, on the majority mass, they don't have all these support, good family support. Maybe they don't have the best privileged jobs, so they can't even support themselves. So how do we acquire and help the people that can't even help themselves, right? And these are on the mass. So only the privileged get to help themselves, right? So basically, if we sort out prevention at the earlier stage, everybody will be on a better state of mind and health. The country will be
like
better
you said, just in cost alone, it'll save you so much.
Yes.
So Harris,
Yeah.
were you going to say something?
I had something in mind as well. No, but I wanted to add on that. I think one of the things, something George mentioned earlier, is the just lack of knowledge. I think one, lack of education. I think that's super big. You know, I feel like I always come across this, especially throughout conversations with most men. But it's always a thing where, out of sight, out of mind, when, it hasn't happened yet, so let's not act on it. Or I already have so many problems, why do I need to worry about something else?
So true.
But where's the line? When do you know, how do you know that problem isn't going to be the last problem you ever have?
Wow.
So you kind of, I think people need to take it a little bit more seriously and start to realize these things.
And I think a lot of it also comes down to the individual. I think of somebody like my dad, when he was in his early 40s, maybe 40, 41, he was diagnosed with pre-diabetic.
Right.
And so he didn't even have diabetes yet, but at that moment, and he also had a support system, which is my mom, who even me and my sister had no candy anymore. Sweets were gone, carbs were gone. And my dad was able to control his blood sugar, that now he can enjoy a little bit. It's all in moderation, but because he was the kind of person who didn't say, oh, pre-diabetic, okay lah. He was like, nope, that's it. And for maybe 10 years, I don't think he ate sugar. And so I think all of those things they're so important.
Yeah, agreed.
I like the way you highlighted, out of mind, out of sight, and out of sight, out of mind. But I'll give you an example about how early diagnosis actually makes all the difference. We all know about Lance Armstrong. Okay? Lance Armstrong, in his 20s, when he was 25, he was diagnosed with testicular cancer. First of all, who would think a 25-year-old would get testicular cancer? But it's not a common knowledge that testicular cancer only affects men below 40.
Oh,
That's right. So, so that's the reason why we only ask men below 40 to do self-examination to make sure they don't have testicular cancer. And testicular cancer is one of the most curable cancers. And then so even at late stage. And Lance Armstrong, even though the testicle was expanding in size when he was in college, and then it's not exactly out of sight, but he's out of his mind. He convinced himself that it's not
normal,
really normal. It's like that until it's so big that you can't carry this in the sack anymore. He just had them removed and it's already spread to his brain, right? So that is exactly how early diagnosis actually makes all difference. I'll give you another example. 2/3 of men in Malaysia presented with late-stage prostate cancer. 2/3 of men. Can you imagine?
God.
So that means that these are the men who are supposed to be curable with cutting-edge technology that we have in Malaysia, such as robotic surgery, but they are not eligible to it anymore is because of late presentation. Why? It's many reasons. I mean, sometimes it's because of lack of awareness, because they don't know screening for prostate cancer marker is one of the keys. Sometimes it's fear, because you worry that what will happen to you because they hear on hearsay about how prostate cancer's treatment will end up with incontinence and erectile dysfunction and sort of thing. That fear alone will defer that diagnosis. And sometimes it's about the responsibility. Let's say, for example, you highlighted that your dad in the 40s actually, with diabetes may need to change his lifestyle. But a breadwinner at the age of 40 carrying the responsibility of looking after the kids, the wife, and the whole family in a sandwich generation. And then if they are down, right, the whole family structure will be a domino effect of down. And they're so scared of that responsibility being, they are shouldering that responsibility, and they are not coming forward purely because they're too scared of cannot afford to fall ill. So those are the things that in the societal kind of like a ecosystem, we don't look at men
more
that
on a
way.
sociological perspective.
So all these things, we just said you must screen. But in their head, they have all these, barrage of emotion, the fear, the lack of awareness, the lack of ability to go and see doctors, who to find, who to trust, and all that really will diminish when we reduce that taboo. We actually say to men that it's okay to discuss this, and also have numerous sources of information and doors for them to open when they face problems of health.
All right, so you brought up a little bit about testicular cancer and prostate cancer. I actually wanted to talk about this because I was thinking about, in preparing for this episode, how this is, obviously a men's health issue. And when you think about breast cancer, which is a women's health issue, we have breast cancer marches, everybody wears the little ribbons. It's like people talk about it. I'm so aware of how to self-check myself for breast cancer, but it's not the same for testicular cancer and prostate cancer. And why do you think that is? Is it just a bit embarrassing? And why is it not embarrassing for women, but embarrassing for men? What do you guys think?
Actually, a good thought. This is my first time actually thinking about that.
They don't want to get their nads touched.
I mean, just to create that awareness is very interesting that no one has. Maybe someone has.
I'm sure there are people talking about it, but it's not in the mainstream. Like everybody knows about breast cancer.
I don't know, George, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Well, it's partly embarrassment. I mean, Harris highlighted earlier on that all his life he feels like he has a father figure or a father himself who can actually go and talk about this. But when you reach certain part of your life where you can't just go to daddy and talk about whether my balls is one side bigger than the others, right? Okay. And then all these are very private matters.
Yeah.
And then men would rather discuss this with their peers in the pub. And I really think that is the whole opportunities in order to highlight these things. So if men don't go to healthcare, then perhaps healthcare can go to men. So for example, where men hang out, and then those are the places where they should have more and more of these awareness things. It's not so embarrassing just to put up a banner saying that testicular cancer only affect men below 40. That sort of things will actually highlight to men. And then first of all, it brings down the whole taboo subjects, right? Okay, because we can have posters of women do self-examination, but if you have a poster of a man kind of like touching their own testicles, people will say, wow, that is
that's
socially unacceptable. You cross the line. But it's all bodily health. It's all sexual health is bodily health. Imagine when the blue pills came out 25 years ago, and then just the thought of erectile dysfunction is such a it's a recreation thing, but many men suffers because of erectile dysfunction. But later on, we realized that erectile dysfunction actually is a barometer of bad health.
That's right.
It's because of men harboring all these non-communicable diseases is that they ended up with erectile dysfunction.
That's right.
So, if you have problems with high blood pressure, you have double the risk of getting erectile dysfunction. Prostate cancer will present with erectile dysfunctions, and all these are issues because it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing because it touches on a very raw nerve of manhood, and then all that. If we can do it for women, since the 60s, to talk about, do you need to have a pap smear?
Yeah, even cervical cancer when the vaccine came
so
out. So
if that is almost a normal thing we can discuss today, why can't we discuss about testicular cancer, examine your own testicles, and why can't we talk about erectile dysfunction being a barometer of diseases that contributes towards a, perhaps in the future cardiovascular event?
Oh wow, I had no idea there was a line between those things.
That's right.
That's so interesting. But what about you guys?
I totally agree with George. I think it's the conversational aspect of it. I think we just don't speak about it enough. I mean, if you just think about it now, I mean, maybe besides George, but how many of us actually know who has had testicular cancer compared to somebody who's had breast cancer? I definitely personally know way. I mean, the conversations out there, people talk about it. They make
proud.
sure, they're proud of it,
Breast
and they want
cancer
to, and
survivors,
they want to protect themselves. I know, friends who are women who thought that they have to make checks because it's so common.
Yeah.
But I have never had that conversation with any guy actually. Yeah, not even and I don't.
Not even a bro.
I would have said I would have said I would have said my dad, but I can't even think. I don't think he even knows. So I think it's to that who we don't know.
And also many people who suffer from the diseases actually hold back because they don't want to talk about it. It's like we have a very famous banker who had prostate cancer. He's a friend of mine, and it took me a whole good year and a half to persuade him, if you come forward, actually talk about it, actually you'll help many, many men. And then he said, well, it will be a sign of weakness if you come forward because people know they are ill, they associate you with illness.
It's more of a sign of strength.
It is, so when you face problems, you face it. And for many men, they worry that if you go public, it's a sign of weakness rather than a sign of recovering from obstacles and resilience. So it's a way that we look at things, and then that need to change.
100%.
Yeah.
So how do we normalize these conversations? I guess we're just gonna start having them more.
Well, it's been normalized here so far.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. I think it's mindset. In the environment and culture, I believe to some degree has its influence upon it.
I think these things need to start when you're 10, 11, 12, you're getting into puberty. That's when I think a lot of things change for us. That's what you were saying earlier, right, Harris? And I think if at that point it's hey, talk to your friends about this, talk to your friends about it, let's talk about it together, let's sit in a safe space and let's have these conversations, then that will carry on throughout your life.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is strokes. So, what are the early signs for people to know that maybe they could be at risk for stroke? Do you guys know of, just by me asking that question, from general information out there?
I had stroke 2 years ago.
You have many things.
I had many things. I've always been a pet subject towards a lot of doctors for many years. You know, I've always been thrown around. I've seen the best physicians. I've seen DNA specialists, top notch for many years. You know, and a lot of it is because of early prevention, right? And the stroke part intrigued me. At first, we thought my first diagnosis thought it was because of exhaustion. But when I forgot how to write, I forgot my name, I lost memory, and then I got diagnosed another 2 times. So it turns out I had a stroke on my medulla, which is my lower part of my brain. I thought it was only left and right stroke. So when I had to relearn everything, I relearn how to walk, I had to relearn how to move, I had to relearn how to spin again, things change, right? As I was recovering, then I understood that the biggest part of how I had stroke was because of stress. It's a nerve thing. My nerve got damaged, right? So that was very interesting for me. And I had to something new to learn, right? It was not easy.
That's a good attitude to have. That's a great attitude to have.
When you've been through so much, you know, you just laugh about life, right?
You gotta
when people say you're gonna die at 23, now I'm almost 40, you don't know what to do, but you just learn about yourself more, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, early prevention, and you hear and meet more people about stroke, and it's quite common thing, right? And if you deliberate what stroke really is, it ignites from the nervous system first, right? So left brain, right brain, medulla, nerve. So what causes the damage to nerve? It could be from bad diet, lack of exercise, hypertension, right? It leads up. This is what I truly believe for my education for the past 2.5 years, right? But I think it's something that it's reoccurring from the early prevention could have been done, understanding your body, you could have strayed away from that scenario, being in that situation.
So did you feel like after you've had the stroke that you've been able to at least physically return to your full strength?
No, I'm still having trouble. Yeah, I have a lot of trouble, even digesting things. Like my memory had relapsed. I could run today, tomorrow I forget 100%. Or my mind will go back to where it was a week ago.
So we can be rude to you and you won't forget.
Oh yeah. I'll take note now. I'll respond later.
All the cameras here.
Yeah. So that's evidence. So just in case you forget, you can play back.
So when it comes to strokes, what are some preventative measures that we can take?
Well, let's go back to the stroke first. I mean, in medical term, stroke is a deprivation of oxygen in part of your brain, okay, which is the nerve. And that can be a transient manner or it's a permanent thing. So a transient manner is called mini stroke. It's called TIA, transient ischemic attack. And then someone will just have a weakness. Commonly, it's weakness on one part of your body, and then usually lasts less than 24 hours. So that will be the commonest reason, commonest manifestation. So for Aiman's manifestation is exceedingly rare. But more commonly, that in a more permanent stroke, it's called infarction. Basically, one part of the brain is completely deprived of oxygen and died. And then, so those nerves are affecting many part of that body will start manifest itself. So some people will manifest itself as a drooling of the face. One side of the face is kind of like not be able to have any muscular responses. Hand, legs, and then also may affect different part of your body, such as your bowel habit, your sexual habits, and also your urination symptoms. And all these are manifested according to which part of your brain is affected. So the commonest reason why people get stroke is a blockage of a common artery. And that blockage can come from a clot that is formed. For example, when the vessel is damaged in the main artery, and then it creates something called atherosclerosis. And that atherosclerosis can actually cause a accumulation of clots. and let's say that clot is in the aorta and suddenly just kind of deposit into the brain and then cause a deprivation of the oxygen. The other common way is irregular heartbeat. So some people will have these kind of like a missing a beat, an irregular heartbeat. When your heart is not in rhythm, then it forms clots. And then that's called atrial fibrillation. And that clot itself can also deposit in the brain and cause strokes. So majority of people call it silent killer. It's because vast majority of us don't know that we have a damaged artery or irregular heartbeat. And then we are not so concerned about it until one day you're not responding, your body is not responding to what you tell it to do, then you realize you have got stroke. So if you're lucky, you recover from it, which is a mini stroke. If you're not lucky, and that can be debilitating because afterwards you'll have to learn the whole thing all over again. It's called rehabilitation. And then so trying to get those nerves reconnected, whether it's possible, not possible, you have to put in a lot of rehabilitative physiotherapy and so on in order to help yourself get back into as close to the state of pre-stroke condition.
Is it possible to go back to pre-stroke?
Not always, not always. So, if the stroke is very dense, you end up with vegetative state that you can't even move. If the stroke is not as dense, and then you see in the movies, in Hollywood, it's kind of like, someone had a stroke, and then after 6 months, and then they are fighting a boxing match again, and that sort of thing. It's not that common in order to get that. It's because your starting point, it's so bad. Let's say, for example, your diabetes is off the shoots, your blood pressure is completely off the shoots, and then also, your cholesterol, you never checked. And then if the damage is so dense that you never recover from it. So coming back to your original question is that I always treat this as the investment you put in your body.
Yep.
So you see, every day we see people who have strokes and then how they ended up with having a really debilitating life. And if you use that as a benchmark and all that investment you put in your body, making sure that what you eat is healthy, making sure that you sleep well, making sure that you're not stressed, making sure you're hydrated, making sure that you have a balanced diet, making sure you have exercise, all these contributes towards a overall better vascular health and making sure that the risk of stroke is less. Of course, Aiman's situation is rare that, stroke might occur out of the blue due to various reasons. However, to be in the safe bet, put in all that investment in your health, and then the risk of you getting stroke will minimize quite significantly. Of course, we can't guarantee it, but if you look at the next person you see that had a stroke, may it be your family member, your neighbors, or anyone, then realizing that it all boils down to years of investing health and healthy lifestyle. Not just diet, not just exercise. It's the sleep, the anxiety, the work-life balance.
Yeah, I mean, like what Aiman said, it was a lot of stress in your life that got you, that had led to that point. And like we were saying, mental health it's a huge part of it. Health is a holistic thing.
I thought I was just exhausted, shivering every day, slurring, I felt it, cannot sleep, you just go for massages every day, day in and out. You thought that it's a common form of exhaustion, right? You never know, right? So I think my biggest mistake was I didn't deliberate earlier. At the moment I had some form of symptom, and I thought it was just common stress of lack of sleep or something in that, right? But accumulative, it causes a stroke, right? And so now you know.
Now you know. So heart health plays a big role in stroke as well. I think heart. Yeah.
Well, cardiovascular, it's by far the most highest risk factors. So if you look at the two major causes of strokes, like atrial fibrillations and atherosclerosis, and then that contributing factors are high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, and perhaps stress.
All right, well, that's all my questions. Thank you so much. It's nice to sit with men and have an open conversation about health and
anytime.
It's a pleasure.
and really learn something. So thank you all for watching. This has been Health Matters by Malaysia Healthcare. Thank you, Harris. Thank you, Aiman. And thank you, Dr. George. Bye.